to your 2020 Super Tuesday election coverage. I'm Tim Bowen. 54 are statewide that are given out.
But then you have more that are translated by congressional district.
Yes, and they're weighted, right?
Right, depending on the region, where are more Democrats strongly located opposed to regions where they're not so much.
So then perhaps the Charlotte region, it's probably more progressive. So that's probably an area where Bernie Sanders needs to do really well to pick up more of those delegates here in North Carolina. That's kind of what we're watching here tonight.
Whereas you might see the African-American segments of perhaps G.K. Butterfield's district translate more so Joe Biden building off of that Jim Clyburn endorsement.
GK. So really, it's interesting to see this on a map because everything's really geographical. We have 5 colors up there. So far, we only see 2. White's up there too, of course, but that's not a candidate. Do we expect to see anything other than orange and green, do you think?
The one big question I have tonight is going to be Massachusetts. That's where Elizabeth Warren is hoping to play. That's her home state. Can she actually get a number on the board? And we just don't know it yet. It's going to be probably pretty tight in that race to see if she's the winner. Now, will she get some delegates out of that state? More than likely. But is she going to actually be able to color in her color on the board?
She says she's staying in, but we'll have to see.
Right.
Kevin Fry, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Tara.
All right, thanks Tim and Kevin. And coming up on our Super Tuesday election coverage, our senior political reporter, Loretta Bonini, joins us with state, house, and Senate results. That's right after this short break. Stay with us here on Spectrum News.
Welcome back to our coverage of Decision 2020 Super Tuesday primary election night coverage. Now, voters across North Carolina today were voting for congressional candidates in brand new drawn districts. This was mandated by the courts. 2 of these districts in particular we are paying close attention to. That's District 2, which includes the city of Raleigh, and District 6, which includes parts of Greensboro and Winston-Salem. Currently, both of these seats are held by Republicans, but the seats as they were redrawn now lean heavily Democratic. In both of the cases, the Republican incumbent chose not to run for re-election, so these are open seats. Let's start with the District 2 Democratic primary race.
Personally, think it's reasonable to make sure that any clinic that performs an abortion has the highest standards, what you would find in a hospital. I personally believe that a doctor who performs an abortion should have to have admitting privileges at a hospital nearby for the safety and the health of the mother. And I absolutely believe that late-term abortions and partial birth abortions should be absolutely eliminated, but for the risk of the life of the mother.
Senator Tillis put his name on a legal brief just earlier this year that went to the U.S. Supreme Court calling for revisiting and overturning exactly that Supreme Court decision. Now, I believe that a woman's choice is a woman's right and that there's no room for a politician like Tom Tillis in a conversation between a woman and her doctor.
Welcome to our Decision 2020 special At Home with Roy Cooper. Every election cycle, voters are bombarded with statistics and accusations and promises from and about candidates. Tonight, we're pushing all of that aside to introduce you to one of the people behind all the noise. Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is running for his 2nd term in office, and we wanted to know more about him and his life and how he became the person he is today. So we went home with Roy Cooper and put aside the issues for the evening.
Growing up here in...
You need to win by double digits to turn this race around.
Look, I'm not the pundit. I think we're going to do very well, and I think it's the start of...
Sort of the FDA for potentially delaying whether it's a vaccine or a therapeutic. Do we have evidence of that, or is that a gut feeling that you have?
Well, I think there's some evidence, and I think it's a big...
As we head into Decision 2020, voters are being faced with a lot of candidates to choose from and even more issues to consider. We're trying to help you sort through the sound bites and have your say before Election Day. We'll be bringing you issues that Republicans and Democrats are talking about. We continue today by introducing you to a couple of Democratic voters who say health care is their top concern this election season. The Bowmans have been married for 14 years, recently moving back to North Carolina from the Sunshine State, but coming back with a heavy burden.
Illness is I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Leon has sarcoidosis, an autoimmune disease that is attacking his lungs.
3 absentee ballots Sue Bider will have hand-delivered for she and her daughters to the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections. Only hers was accepted.
The Mecklenburg County Board of Elections is not able to process your absentee ballot. Further action is required.
The letter stating there was a problem with her government-issued ID number.
Or the last 4 digits of your Social Security, which she did put the last 4 digits of her Social Security number on her original application.
Elections officials told her they invalidated that ballot and would send a new one for Biderwood's daughter, but they're still left a bit confused.
It could be human error. I don't know. I mean, it's hand printed, so possibly someone read the information incorrectly.
Tuesday night, boards of elections across the state began processing tens of thousands of completed absentee ballots.
We have accumulated a bipartisan team to look at these, multi-partisan teams, as a matter of fact.
In Mecklenburg County, that equated to 35,649 ballots. It took the board 14 hours to go through them all.
I have 44 bins.
However, before they begin verifying each ballot for valid signatures, address and voter information, and ballot selections, board members grappled with guidance from the State Board of Elections director on how to fix ballots that contain mistakes.
And she is jumping the gun. I've never seen an overreach like this under a Democrat or Republican governor.
What's the issue? Well, state elections officials are taking heat for allowing something called a cure certification to be sent to voters whose ballots have missing witness signatures or addresses in the wrong place. That curing process is used to confirm the missing information.
And I think I took an oath to follow the laws of North Carolina.
Republicans are calling the process illegal, saying it violates a sweeping bipartisan 2019 law meant to shore up election security by, in part, requiring witness signatures. It spawned a legal fight over absentee ballots. Former Union County District Attorney and election law expert John Snyder explained the 3 different lawsuits currently playing out in 3 different jurisdictions.
These lawsuits affect specifically absentee ballots and remote balloting.
And the court then comes back and says, no, 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 you need to send these people new ballots. It's going to be like looking for a needle in a haystack to retrieve all these ballots and match them up with the envelopes and send them back to the voter. It's just going to be difficult.
Snyder summed up just how difficult.
Could result in 3 different results on how our election is conducted,
leaving engaged voters like Sue Biderwood to be concerned about others who have issues with their absentee ballot.
Because there's human error possible, it's a hand-filled out form. You've really got to make sure your printing is legible and accurate and correct.
It's a civic duty, she says, is particularly critical this year, and one she suggests getting done sooner than later.
Because if you do have an issue like I've had, you have time to fix it. And this is an important election. People need to get out and vote and make sure it's counted, and don't be discouraged.
Sue Biderwood had some other good suggestions. She says if anyone doesn't understand something on their ballot, to contact their local board of elections. She says they've been extremely helpful in her case. And also, she wishes she had taken a picture of her ballot just so she had a record of the envelope and the ballot. We'll keep you posted on what happens with those 3 lawsuits. In the studio, Jonathan Lowe, Spectrum News 1.
10 Democratic presidential hopefuls were on the stage for over 2 hours trying to win over any undecided voters. We wondered who those folks were, so we brought together a focus group of undecided Democratic North Carolina voters to see what's swaying them heading into 2020. Meet the participants. Grayson Barnett, a Democratic strategist who is undecided but leaning towards Warren, but says this debate will help him decide.
Climate change. I think that's the most immediate pressing issue. I think the United States has to be the world leader on that, and I think that's really important to the communities of North Carolina as well.
Nita Alam, the 3rd vice chair in the state Democratic Party, who is undecided in this race. She lives in Durham.
I think for me, knowing the values that I carry and the issues that are really close to me, it's becoming easier to start narrowing it as these debates happen, as there are conversations outside of the debates, to really see who is carrying forward policies that really matter to me.
Bill Futterer, he's a sports and entertainment executive who is leaning towards Biden in this primary field. He lives in Rockingham.
Well, as a marketer, I look at objectives first, and the objective right now has to be to win back the White House. It's just too critical. We can't afford to take chances.
And Catherine Leak, a freelance political consultant who is undecided in this field of candidates. She's from Wilson.
I believe there are only 4 that are speaking to me, and they are a part of my top 5.
It didn't take long into the debate for our group of voters to start their own discussion about the candidates on stage.
I keep worrying that Joe is going to have a Howard Dean or Edmund Muskie moment and burn up.
While they all came in with their favorites, they also came in with open minds. For this group, many were impressed with some moments from Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Joe was like, dang it, I was about to mention
That was a strong response.
That was good.
That was
very
strong
authentic from her too.
And some questions about other candidates.
You can tell she's always looking for an argument and wanting to pick fights with certain people.
The debate was wide-ranging on stage, from impeachment to health care to voter suppression. The conversation at our studio was also wide-ranging.
Not anybody that would like overtake my top, but I do think that Klobuchar is giving more specific details and actually talking a little bit more about progressive policy and and her takes on it. And I'm actually going to give her a little bit more credit than I thought I was going to tonight.
Interestingly, what I've heard here has been more influential to me than what I've heard there, because I'm hearing wise young people talk about progressive politics in a way that unfortunately doesn't make it on television very often, and not one of them has said, "Okay, boomer," to me.
These voters here in North Carolina will have until March 3rd to pick their primary candidate, but the field to choose from may have been whittled down before then, with the first caucus February 3rd in Iowa. Spectrum News will be following along and listening to what you, the voter, are looking for throughout the 2020 race. Loretta Beniti, Spectrum News.
It's election night in America, amid a year like no other.
I have signed a stay-at-home order for the entire state of North Carolina.
A worldwide pandemic shatters life as we know it.
The virus wants to do what the virus wants to do.
The coronavirus revealing cracks in our system amid calls for social justice. Civil unrest in the streets of America.
I can't breathe. This is something that's going to be in the history books. It's something that's going to be talked about.
Now, a contentious fight for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the White House.
This is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together.
North Carolina lost nearly half of its manufacturing jobs thanks to NAFTA.
With so much upheaval this year in our lives and with the election, it just feels different. But our mission remains the same. Our Decision 2020 coverage starts right now. We've made it, folks. Can you believe it? Good evening and welcome to this Decision 2020 special election night right here in North Carolina. I am Tim Boyne, proud and honored to be with you here tonight. For months, candidates on all levels have been making their pitches to voters, but for us here at Spectrum News 1, we're doing things differently to bring you the results. First, let's get you up to speed on some things that have happened during the day. By the way, those polls, they have not closed yet. The State Board of Elections has in fact delayed releasing early voting results until 8:15 p.m. tonight. That is because 10 precincts had some issues this morning that affected their opening. Those precincts in some areas, including Cabarrus, Guilford, Sampson, and Warren counties, remain open past the 7:30 p.m. closing time. By the way, if you're in line at 7:30, stay there. You can still vote. Meanwhile, voters are taking to the streets once again in Alamance County. This just days after a peaceful march took a turn, garnering national attention. Police in Graham pepper sprayed marchers who were walking to an early voting site on Saturday. That group came back today, marched to a polling site to cast their votes. Now this year, for our election night, we have people that are all over the great state of North Carolina. We're going to hear from residents who have been advocating on these big issues during the campaign. In Charlotte, we have Claudine Chalfant at Johnson C. Smith University. She's near Uptown Charlotte. That's where she's talking with young voters there. So, Claudine, what can we expect from you tonight? Good evening.
Good evening, Tim. I think you said it best. We finally made it. Election night 2020. Kind of can't believe it. It has been a long several months, but so glad it's here. And I'm glad to be part of this coverage because we are offering perspectives from all across the state the young vote may be one of the most decisive this year. So we're talking to some young voters here in Charlotte and Davidson. A student from Chapel Hill even decided to come down and join us as well. We also want to speak with some political figures who have been in politics for decades. We'll see what they have to say about all of this as well. Speaking of masks, the pandemic, we're going to talk about that too. So Tim, jam-packed, so happy to be here with you tonight as well.
Yeah, lots to cover. We look forward to it, Claudine. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, in Greensboro, Rob Wu is at the Greensboro History Museum, where they are highlighting the protests for social justice and racial equality that happened earlier this summer. So, Rob, boy, those issues could have had an impact in the election. A lot of it, you can see the memories right behind you there.
That's right, Tim. This may be the issue where we see the greatest contrast between the candidates. President Trump has used words like thugs and anarchists to describe some of the protesters. He's framed himself as the law and order candidate while arguing Joe Biden is weak on crime. The former vice president, of course, has a very different take. He says he's the candidate who can unite a divided nation. He says the president's rhetoric has, quote, fanned the flames of hate. As for whose message could resonate more, we might find out later tonight. Now, what I can guarantee you, we'll learn a lot more about the exhibits inside this museum, each piece telling a unique story of social justice in Greensboro in 2020. We'll highlight one piece of a little girl and a protest leader that has touched people around the world. Tim, back to you.
Yeah, that's just an incredible story. Look forward to that, Rob. Thank you very much. Our Mary Helen Jones, she's on the waterfront of the Cape Fear River in Wilmington. Boy, the storms and the coronavirus pandemic have had a major impact, not only in the port city, but all of those surrounding communities. So, Mary Helen, these are big issues there.
That's right, Tim. We're here at the George Restaurant on Wilmington's Riverwalk. Beautiful night, beautiful day, full of voting. But as you mentioned, we have seen storms batter the coast over the past few years. We're going to talk about climate change, how it has impacted the coast as well as the people who live here. We're going to talk about tourism. One of the biggest industries here, brings in hundreds of millions of dollars, completely shut down earlier this year. We're also going to talk about how the scars are still being seen and felt here in Wilmington over a racial coup that happened over 100 years ago. We're going to go inside that exhibit, talk about how poignant it is, especially in the year 2020. But first, we're going to start it all off talking about small businesses. Some, Tim, here on the coast are really struggling while others are booming. We've got a lot coming up throughout the night here in Wilmington.
All right, Mary Helen, thank you. A lot of people staying home and vacationing, helping some for those businesses. We'll hear more about that. Boy, that urban-rural economic divide, it's been a major undercurrent, not only in the 2020 election, but really life in North Carolina. So let's go to Fair Bluff. That's in Columbus County, where we find Jonathan Lowe tonight. So Jonathan, you've seen firsthand how this divide is affecting communities.
Absolutely, Tim. Good evening to you. As you said, I'm here in Fair Bluff in the southeastern part of the state, really at the bottom end of the Sandhills region. This is one area of the state where people here that have lived here for years will tell you it's not the presidential election that really is what they are focused on. It's those local issues, those local elections, those local candidates that really make a difference. Here in Fair Bluff, this is one of those economically distressed part of the state. It's a small town or a small rural county, could also face something like this, but the downtown area, non-existent after being hit by 2 natural disasters. Tonight you're going to hear what matters most to small towns and rural counties in tonight's election. Tim?
All right, Jonathan, we look forward to that. A lot of great stories coming across and the folks that are impacted by the votes and decisions made by these candidates. But we also have crews in Delaware and Washington tonight monitoring the Joe Biden and President Trump campaigns. Our Kevin Fry joins us now. And Kevin, we'll have him shortly. But first, let's go to Leanne Wallace, who's on the lawn of the White House. Good evening, Leanne.
Good evening to you, Tim. This is where President Trump will be watching the results come in tonight. In fact, we've even seen some of his guests make their way to the White House earlier today as well. But before tonight, the president was making some of those last-minute campaign stops in battleground states. Of course, he was also in North Carolina yesterday. Now, earlier today, he met with supporters and reporters at the Republican National Committee's headquarters. Here's what he had to say when thinking about perhaps serving another 4 years.
I hear we're doing very well in Florida. We're doing very well in Arizona. We're doing incredibly well in Texas. I'm hearing we're doing well all over. I hear the lines are amazing. The lines have been amazing. And I think we're going to have a great night.
Well, of course, we might not even know the results yet tonight because the pandemic really changed how people voted with so many more people voting by mail. But of course, we'll be here at the White House to watch as the results come in. But for now, I'm Leanne Wallace for Spectrum News.
All right, Leanne, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now let's go to our Kevin Fry. He's been monitoring the Biden-Harris campaign outside of Wilmington, Delaware. Kevin, how are they feeling tonight?
Well, there is a cautious optimism certainly here at Biden campaign headquarters tonight, which in effect is basically a large parking lot here in Wilmington. The campaign has really left no cards on the table today with all the four principals, both the candidates and their spouses out on the trail, basically trying to motivate voters to head to the polls. Biden started his day going to church here in Wilmington before heading to his hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, visited his own childhood home before then heading to Philadelphia. The Commonwealth is going to be so important tonight. Biden has said that repeatedly. If he can win the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, he can effectively block Trump's most logical pathway to victory tonight, denying him a second term in the White House. And so the goal of these visits is certainly to try to motivate voters to head to the polls, mobilize just that last effort to get folks to actually vote. Now, back here in Wilmington tonight, our understanding is that the vice president is supposed to address the nation in some capacity tonight. Whether that will be a victory speech, a concession speech, or none of the above, we simply don't know. There are vehicles starting to, it appears, park in front of the stage that we have behind us. This is going to be another one of those kind of drive-in movie type speeches this evening. Our understanding from the pool reporters who are with the Biden campaign is that he is going to be watching the results come in, the returns come in from home with his family. Tim?
Yeah, so Kevin, to that point, the Biden campaign has run this so much differently than the Trump campaign. President Trump's been holding big rallies. We've seen that even in North Carolina. Joe Biden has not. We should say, by the way, Joe Biden was in North Carolina, made a quick stop in the Triangle today. But what is the atmosphere behind you? We can just see the big screen, but are we expecting hundreds of people there or dozens, or what are we thinking?
Honestly, it'll probably be in the hundreds range if they actually do fill in the parking lot with all of the cars. If just from a basic capacity standpoint, even just us, the press, we were very much limited in the number of people we were able to have in these areas, as they have throughout this campaign, taking COVID-19 precautions rather seriously, which has, as one could say, the coronavirus has really only underlined the contrast between the Trump and Biden techniques, their approaches to this pandemic, and also, quite frankly, to how they would handle things in the White House and on the campaign trail, Tim.
Yeah, the Biden team really pushing that throughout this campaign. All right, Kevin Fry in Delaware tonight. We'll talk to him a little bit later. Well, all night, of course, we're going to be watching the results as they start to come in across the state and the country. That includes things like president, U.S. Senate, and governor. We have all three of those in North Carolina tonight. Of course, the balance of power in Congress and the General Assembly. All seats in the General Assembly are up tonight. Loretta Benetti is going to be tracking all of those races for us tonight. So, Loretta, the most important thing is we're still waiting, potentially here for another hour and 5 minutes, I guess.
Well, that's right. We're starting to see the polls close in a few states that did close at 7 o'clock this evening. In fact, two of the battleground states, Georgia and Virginia, have closed their polls now. But this issue of balance of power is actually something that is quite a story that's going to be told tonight, because it matters which party is in power as far as what bills are going to get passed, what's going to become law in the country. And we have certainly seen a lot of gridlock in Washington over the past few years. One of the biggest stories is the U.S. Senate balance of power, especially here in North Carolina. If you take a look at this board right here, what we are going to be talking about are these 35 seats right here. They are all up for election. Right now, 23 of them are held by Republicans, 12 of them are held by Democrats. Republicans have the majority in the Senate, but if Democrats are able to pick up just 4 of those seats this evening, they're going to be able to take the majority. One of those seats that they're hoping to take over is here in North Carolina. Our incumbent is Republican Tom Tillis. He's being challenged by Democrat Cal Cunningham. This has been a very close race the entire time. People have really been paying attention to this. This might determine what the balance of power is in the U.S. Senate by who wins that race. Now, in the U.S. House, it's not quite the same story. Democrats have a very substantial lead there. You'll see that this entire screen is gray right here. That's because every seat was up for re-election. Actually, look down here, we actually have 3 red dots. That's because, as I said, a few states have already closed. It looks like they are projecting that 3 Republicans have already won their seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. What we're watching for here in North Carolina when it comes to the U.S. House of Representatives is several of our congressional districts needed to be redrawn because the court said that we had to. Seats that are currently held by Republicans Well, they're now considered Democratic districts. We're expecting that we will pick up 2 more Democratic members of our congressional delegation before this evening is over, Tim.
All right, so the General Assembly is something else we're watching very closely. Republicans have had pretty firm control since 2010 there, but Democrats are hoping they can not only make inroads, perhaps take a chamber, or maybe even both.
Well, that's right. Republicans have had control of the legislature for about a decade now. They actually had a supermajority for quite a number of years, which meant even if the governor vetoed something, there were enough Republicans that they could override all of those vetoes. Right now, in the Senate, there are 29 Republicans, 21 Democrats. Democrats are looking for these 5 seats right here. If they're able to flip 5 seats this evening, Democrats will be able to take over power of the Senate. Now, everybody that we talked to says that there probably are 7 or 8 seats that are in play in the Senate. So this is actually a possibility before the end of the evening. Over on the House side, Republicans also have the majority in that chamber. It's 65 Republicans, 55 Democrats. And this is where Democrats are really hopeful that they'll be able to take over, but they need to flip 6 seats in the House. Now, there's 120 seats that are in play when we're talking about the House. However, these races are a lot closer. And in many cases, Republicans say they believe they may be able to pick up a few Democratic seats. So when we're talking 6 seats in the state House, this might be a tougher get for Democrats before the evening's over.
Yeah, going to have to see how those trends are going. Our Lord of Beniti, thank you so much. Of course, also on the ballot are these statewide races. We know them as the Council of State. Includes things like Lieutenant Governor, State Attorney General, and of course, much, much more. Let's go to our Sharon Tazewell now. She's going to be following those races for us this evening. We could see some history made tonight.
You're exactly right, Tim. Actually, history will be made tonight for Lieutenant Governor. We're also keeping a close eye on Treasurer and Agriculture Commissioner. Those could also lead to historic moments tonight. There's only been one person of color that has held statewide office, and that was State Auditor Ralph Campbell, first elected back in 1992. Well, tonight, in the race for Lieutenant Governor, we will see another black person elected. It will either be Republican Mark Robinson or Democrat Yvonne Hawley. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Treasurer race. In the race for Treasurer, another potential first tonight as Democrat Ronnie Chatterjee is challenging Republican incumbent Dale Folwell, who is running for a 2nd term. Now, if elected, Chatterjee would be the first Asian American elected to a statewide office in North Carolina. Taking a closer look, also yet another potential first in the Agriculture Commissioner field there. Democrat Jenna Wadsworth is facing off against Republican incumbent Steve Troxler for Agriculture Commissioner. Now he's running for a 5th term. Now keep in mind, if elected, Jenna Wadsworth would be the first out LGBTQ constitutional officer. So Tim, history will be made tonight. It's just a matter of how much at the end of the night.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting races with some rematches, an insurance commissioner, a lot of interesting ones to follow. Sharon Tazewell will stay on top of it. Thank you very much. Well, coming up, we head to the Queen City. We're going to get a look at all those young voters who are taking part in this election. Some record numbers. So will they sway this race one way or the other? Stay with us. Our Decision 2020 election night coverage continues right there when we return.